Hello, brothers and sisters, and welcome to day 86 of the Chronological Read Through the Bible. Today's reading and commentary covers Joshua chapter 15, verse 20 through chapter 17. I want to really focus today on trust the Lord. He will deliver you. He will defeat your enemies, but you need to move forward as He leads. So, as we've talked about in the previous chapters, you need to consult the Lord, seek His face, don't just make decisions without His guidance, and as He guides, move forward. He tells us not to fear the enemy around us, yet fear is a crippling agent that holds so many people back. And at the end of the day, even the thing that we fear, very few people ever actually are met with the thing that they were apprehensive about. The thing that paralyzed them, the thing that they completely were crippled over, rarely comes about. And even if it does, He is God, and He will guide us through that time. And it's a matter of us trusting the Lord. Today I want to focus a little bit on a couple of things that the Hebrew people were held back by. Now, if we look back, and I had meant to address this when it popped up in chapter 11, but I think now it's actually more fitting. In chapter 11 of Joshua, verse 9, Joshua did to them as the Lord had told him. He hamstrung their horses and burned their chariots with fire. Now, you would say, why did they burn the chariots? They could use these. Well, again, the Lord had told them to do this, and it was because the Lord wanted them to trust in Him alone, and not trust in the power of the horses, and not trust in the fastness, the response of the horses pulling the chariots. And hamstringing the horses, I know this may sound horrible, but hamstringing the horses meant that they would not be fit for battle and that they would not be able to run fast, but they would be fit for farming. And it was a practice in times past that if a horse was too aggressive and too enthusiastic, really if you were going to have just a farm horse pulling a plow or pulling a wagon but didn't need speed to it, they would hamstring it. That is a practice and not something I've had many horses in my lifetime. I could not imagine doing that to a horse. But the purpose in this was so that the people would not rely upon the horse or the chariot, but rely upon God. Let's look at where King David makes reference to this in Psalm chapter 20, verse 7. He says, some boast in chariots, and some in horses, but we will boast in the name of the Lord our God. They have bowed down and fallen, but we have risen up and stood upright. So it's to say, to give this comparison, those who trust in horses and the chariot, they will what? They will bow down and fall. But those who trust in the Lord will be lifted up. They will stand upright. So trust in Him. And then we're going to see as we move through today's reading, Joshua spoke to the house of Joseph and Ephraim and Manasseh, saying, you are numerous people and have great power. You shall not have one lot only. Well, they had been given the opportunity of having more than one. Let me back up to the previous verse, verse 16. The sons of Joseph said, the hill country is not enough for us, and all the Canaanites who live in the valley land have chariots of iron. Both those who are in Bethshean and its towns, and those who are in the valley of Jezreel. So they're saying, well, we can't take this land. They have chariots. They have horses. But Joseph's telling them, but the hill country shall be yours. So they are allowing fear to stop them. What's fear stopping you from doing? What is your false trust in a horse or a chariot? And I realize we're not operating in that time period today, but are there things that you are placing your trust in other than God? I've used many times before the analogy of a credit card as far as people, if they reach that financial crunch time, they're like, they don't pray, they just, well, I can charge it. I was raised in a house where my dad said that if you don't have enough money to pay for it today, what makes you think you're going to have enough money to pay for it tomorrow? So it's sort of this principle of, if you were going to put something on a charge card, you should only do that if you even had the money to pay for it right then. Really, it's just better not to operate like that. And for me, as being a missionary, for many years, I had people tell me, oh, you got to have a credit card. You couldn't be working overseas. You can't live overseas without having a credit card. What if an emergency arises? Well, to this day, I don't have a credit card. And anytime an emergency arose, guess who rose up to meet that emergency? The Lord, my God. And He will rise up to meet your emergency. I'm not saying it's a sin to have a credit card. I'm not saying cut them up, burn them, or hamstring them. What I am saying, though, is that you need to make sure that that's not what your trust is in. That your trust isn't in your health insurance. That when you get sick, you don't say, well, at least I have health insurance. Your first trust, your first turn should be to the Lord. And trust in Him. God will never let you down. Other things can let you down in life, but God will not if you put your trust in Him. And that's all we're called to do. And then I also want to come back and say, the Lord gives direct instruction to them to wipe out the Canaanites, and yet what did they do? They decide, well, we're going to put the Canaanites to forced labor. Well, let me ask you this, how does that turn out for them? Well, we're about to see that the Lord told them to erase these people. And I know I've addressed this. I know that sounds horrible. Erase these people. But the Lord knew what evil they had done and what evil they would continue to do. And this is why they were to be erased from the land. As I say, again, I addressed this just in brief yesterday. But people oftentimes say, well, why would God allow this evil to happen? But then when God stops the evil, people say, well, why would God do something like that? Who are we to question really what the Lord's doing and why He's doing it? We only need to trust in Him. Trust and obey, right? For there's no other way to be happy in Jesus but to trust and obey. Well, brothers and sisters, I hope that as you take in this portion of Scripture, you see some of the deep meaning here and the meaning behind trusting in Him and believing in Him and not trusting in things like the chariot or the horse. Well, I hope that your day's going well. Until tomorrow, God bless.